Welcome, busy gamers. Today we're going to be talking about Dorf Romantik. What's good, what's bad, and that all-important question, is it worth your time? If you've joined me for another one of these videos before, feel free to skip to the section you're most interested in, and if not, let's head right to the overview. Dorf Romantik was developed and published by Toukana Interactive. Dorf Romantik's goal is in its name. It loosely translates to something like Romantic Village. And from what I can tell from previous interviews and press releases on the game, it also stands for that feeling of nostalgia or longing. That longing to be in the countryside or the open air. The game has a focus on relaxing and engaging your mind in an almost meditative way. But at its core, it's a puzzle game, and it draws strong similarity to board games like Carcassonne in its mechanics. Throughout the game, you're going to be placing hexagonal tiles from a stack and building outwards from previously placed tiles to create a landscape that's intended to be both aesthetically pleasing while earning yourself a shot at a high score. As you place tiles, you're going to be scoring 10 points for each terrain that matches the adjacent tiles. For example, forest to forest, grassland to grassland, and etc. If you eventually surround a tile perfectly, matching all of the terrain types around it, you will also score a bonus 60 points. This is going to be your main bread and butter way to score points. You'll also be given goals though, or quests as tiles appear. This is going to encourage you to create large areas of fields or areas with specific numbers of things like houses, or to completely close out a specific terrain. Completing these goals is going to net you bonus points as well as extend your game time by adding new tiles to your draw pile. This creates a nice balance between pure scoring and achieving or building towards overarching goals. Which, speaking of, there are multi-game goals, such as placing a certain number of tiles out onto the board or completing games with a certain minimum score. These things are basically going to just unlock new aesthetic variations of your tiles and have seasonal changes within the map itself. In addition, the main way to play Dorf Romantik, as we've discussed, is all the rules we already explained. However, there's a quick mode that follows all the same rules, but it limits your play to 75 tiles. A hard mode with less quests and more awkward or complex tiles. A monthly mode that has custom rules and starts all players with the exact same tiles so they can compete for a high score. And this probably is the most competitive mode, as well as a completely casual mode in which all players can design and create their idyllic countryside with no restraints. Don't like a tile? Dump it. Don't want this tile? Dump it as well. You can copy things, you can change their colors, etc. All of these particular game modes have a purpose, but as a traditionally competitive person myself, I think the monthly challenge mode is my favorite. Now, at the time of this review, I've played Dorf Romantik for about 6 hours. So far, I've focused only on the scored versions of the game, as the designer or casual mode does not really appeal to me personally. So, what's good about Dorf Romantik? The game executes phenomenally on its calming and meditative goal. The soundtrack is calming and ambient in nature, often being made primarily of chimes interspersed with the occasional moo from cows, which, oddly, I never laid a single eye on. The patterns and designs you'll inevitably create while focusing on your score does create a fun and often pleasing landscape, as waterways form and adapt to how they're placed in order to give you a constant flow, which is just a nice touch for any facet of the tiles to be dynamic. I also think the scoring was implemented very well in this particular game, and it fit perfectly into the relaxed and undemanding nature of the game. You're never rushed with the time limit on tile placement, and often the best placement aesthetically would also be the one with the highest overall score. It strikes a pretty good balance in the trade-off between placing a tile in the most advantageous place immediately or setting up large areas that contribute to future quests or netting you an income of tiles. The final thing I want to mention in the positive section is that it does have a good sense of progression. While I'll use this term somewhat lightly here, having the ever-present and visible goals on the screen for the next upgrade or unlock was effective at driving me onward and getting me to place more tiles. When the unlocks did trigger, they gave me new biomes, tile arrangements, and altered the overall look, feel, and variety of what I would draw. My personal preferences lean more towards concrete unlocks as well, but for this game's goal and purpose, I do think it was well done. So what is bad? What's bad about Dorfromantik? I found that the general game, it lasted too long. While it was fun to place tiles and increase my score, I often found myself wishing there was a more natural conclusion to the game far before it actually ended. For me, this was primarily because as the board continued to expand and you continued to gather more and more tiles to place, it became difficult to find a best placement as there were just so many more options, causing turns to start to drag out and lengthen with what I thought was unnecessarily. Adding tiles also inherently creates randomness, and this is likely a holdover or a complaint from playing a lot of board games and tile laying games like Carcassonne. I kept wanting to play with a set number of tiles and options, but with a randomized order, so that instead of being truly random, it was random within a limitation. And decisions, like if I put this here, now I know there's no tile to fit into that spot ever again. That kind of decision didn't exist for me. So now we'll move on to the ephemeral efficiencies here, with the base game lasting several hours and the quick game often running 30 minutes, while feeling like a fairly stunted version of the main game, its only change being a turn limit, but literally nothing else. It's hard for me to say that Dorfromantik really takes your time into consideration. It's a game that wants you to get lost in it. It's a game that wants you to spend time and relax. And therefore, talking about efficiency is almost counter to the game's overall goal. So let's move on to the final scores. Overall, I gave this game a 7. It's a great game that comes with a caveat. The game 100% is not for everyone. It achieves most of its goals, a casual pastel-colored beauty, and a relaxing yet compelling gameplay loop, but it remains too simple for me. My brain doesn't relax by taking things slow, and it needs almost constant engagement or goes off on tangents I really would prefer it didn't. Depending on how you relax, this game could be amazing, or it could be very poor for you. So my recommendation is to think about how and why you would enjoy a game like this, if it's competition, if it's score, if it's solving puzzles. If those are your primary goals, I'd recommend you go ahead and pass on this game. I went ahead and gave this game an ephemeral efficiency score of 5. Yes, you can enter and leave the game as you choose to do so, but for me, when I like to game, I like to see some form of completion of what I have started. And you cannot do that within a reasonable time frame in this game, except on the quick mode, and the quick mode just doesn't feel worth it. These are clearly my opinions, but I think that means this game deserves a 5 here. If you have the time to dump into it, if you have the time to just really take that breath and relax, it's worth it. It's worth a chance. So that's my review. If you've stuck with me, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Please, if you like this content and want to see more, drop me a like, a subscription, or just give me some feedback in a comment. Until next time, have fun gaming.